Well, hello and welcome to episode 210 of Drink the Movies. I'm Brian here, as always, with Michaela. And Michaela, Gene Hackman, legendary actor, just passed away a couple of weeks ago. And we wanted to make sure that we paid homage to this great actor who did a lifetime of movies, right? So over 100 acting credits to Gene Hackman's name. Has a couple of Oscar wins, multiple Oscar nominations. And if you went out onto the street right now and you said, hey, what was your favorite Gene Hackman performance? To any, just kind of general movie-going watcher out there, maybe they'll say The French Connection. Maybe, right? Maybe they'll say The Royal Tenenbaums. Maybe they'll say Unforgiven. Maybe. But
Mm,
what they're probably going to say is Hoosiers.
they're probably going to say Hoosiers. And it's weird actually because I grew up not watching this film, and we're going to get into it, of course. But I am curious because you were from the North. You're from Ohio.
From the Arctic
I'm
North, yes.
from the Arctic North, but I feel like this is Indiana, right? This is like
It is.
Midwest. I don't even
Hmm.
right. This definitely like feels like Midwestern farm town, like hopes and dreams in a bottle that is actually not a bottle at all. It's a basketball. Um, this didn't cross my path until probably high school, and people were looking at me like I was nuts because this could arguably be the greatest basketball like sports film of all time.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people would say that it is the best sports movie of them all, and we're definitely going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Gene Hackman, all of it, and it was perfect timing, right? Obviously, to pay homage to Gene Hackman, but we're right in the heart of March Madness itself. So let's go ahead and do this, Michaela. Let's take a quick break. We've got a really good cocktail that pays honor to the Hoosier State, to Indiana's official cocktail. We're going to be making up one of those, and we'll be right back to do that and chat about it. So hold tight, and we'll be right back.
So, Brian, I did some research because I hadn't seen Hoosiers in a really long time. And so I was
Mhm.
like, we could do this one of a couple ways, right? We could watch the movie and try and see if there's drinking in it. And God knows there's a lot of drinking in it. But
There is, yes.
and there is, and it's mostly whiskey actually, which
Hmm.
trends. I mean, that
Hmm.
tracks, right? But
Yeah.
I really wanted to do something that was going to be like really representative of the story itself of like this little town that makes it great because of a few talented boys and then one incredibly talented yet troubled coach. And what I found was there is an official state cocktail for Indiana. Now, I don't know if every state has a cocktail, but they should. Now
Yeah,
I
they
got to go
should.
look up the other 50, you know?
That's right. Yeah, one down, 49 to go for sure. Yeah, that's a great way to do it because the film Hoosiers is of course about this basketball team, but it's as much a love letter to Indiana or small town Indiana or like farm towns in the Midwest as it is about basketball. And we're making today the Hoosier Heritage. We're getting the cocktail. It comes from an article in Indy Today, but you can just type in Hoosier Heritage. You can find pretty much the recipe on a lot of places, and it became the official state cocktail for Indiana in 2015. It was originally created by a bartender by the name of Jason Faust. So shout out to Jason there. Thank you for making this one because Michaela, this one was really good.
Yeah, we can say Hoosiers is arguably one of the best, if not the best, basketball movies of all time. This might be the best
I don't know if Indiana's good at
cocktail.
anything else, but this cocktail, they're good at that
They're
for
real good
sure.
at this. They're real good at this. We're good at making farm movies and stuff. And this is holy moly. Yeah, this is great.
This
And
is
I
great.
was terrified because I first when I first read this it's called for apple cider, and the first time I saw it, I thought it was apple cider vinegar, and I immediately was like,
Oh,
"Woo!" So don't make that mistake.
don't do that. Don't do that. Yeah, don't do
Don't do
that for
that
sure.
because that might not be good, but this is delicious.
Yeah, for sure. It is going to call for apple cider. So let's go ahead and address that first off. If you're in Indiana, probably not even in Indiana this time of year. Maybe if you're in Michigan, maybe if you're in like upstate New York, you can get apple cider year round. If you're not in those places, you're probably going to be able to get it in the fall. And then beyond that, you're really going to be pressing your luck to find it. So obviously here in North Carolina, I could not find any delicious fresh pressed apple cider. This cocktail would probably be even better if you could find that. But what I did find at the grocery store was just like 100% pressed apple juice. I figured that was as close as I was going to be able to get. That's what I used. I'm assuming that you probably used something similar, Michaela, in yours. So let's go ahead and throw one of these together. Into a
All
shaker
right.
tin with some ice goes 1.5 ounces of either bourbon or rye whiskey. I used rye, the original one that Jason Faust made. Used a Knob Creek rye. I used an Elijah Craig rye, but either a bourbon or a rye whiskey. 1.5 ounces of that. 1 ounce of your apple cider. A half ounce of lemon juice, or roughly the juice from about a half of a lemon, a half ounce of maple syrup. So go ahead and shake that up. You're going to want to give it a pretty thorough shake to make sure that maple syrup gets dissolved nicely into the cocktail. And then go ahead, you can either strain that into a glass with some fresh ice, or I just kind of dumped mine. I just did like a shake and dump there with the ice into a glass. And then you can top it with cayenne pepper, which I thought that I had, and I did not. But what I did have was some tahini. So I used that instead, and that was the best decision I could have ever made because that was delicious.
Yeah, I have to say I have cayenne because it's kind of a muscle memory. Anytime I'm making anything creamy, I add a little bit of cayenne for some heat. And I do a lot of cream at my house. If you've not seen me, you would know that. But I tried it both ways, and I have to say, Brian, I hate it when you're right, but you were so
Mm,
right. It's way better with the tahini. And I don't know if it's the salt inside it, because
yeah.
tahini has just generally like a more sodium kind of content. I think tahini
Hmm.
has actual like salt in it. I don't think it's a straight
Yeah.
um pepper that they've ground or something. I don't know what's in tahini.
So tahini is it's a blend of like chili powder, like some different
Mm,
chilies into a chili powder, salt and
mm.
lime, dehydrated
Yeah.
lime. So you get a little bit of pop from that salinity there of the salt. You get a little bit of that lime. I think kind of I don't know. It just kind of cuts through kind of the sweeter complexities there of the apple and the maple. Tahini.
Yeah.
Do tahini.
Do tahini.
Indiana, try it out. Maybe we're
Be-
blasphemous. I don't know.
well, I mean, there are a lot, I feel like Indiana is like going to have like real bland stuff. Maybe I'm wrong, but they could use a little
Wow.
tahini. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, look, after watching the movie Hoosiers, the best thing about that was like learning how they pressed sugar cane. I had no idea. I was like, what are they doing? But I digress. I digress. We'll talk about this cocktail. Um, so this is one of the best cocktails we've ever done. And I feel like I've said that the last couple times
Mm-hmm.
we have covered a movie, but we're either just hitting it all on all cylinders in 2025, or that's the piece that the
Cocktails taste
Matrix
better
said
in
they
2025,
just
I think
taste
is what
better
it is.
because the rest of the world is falling apart. I don't know, but this was so good. You got like this citrusiness of the lemon. You got that acidity really because you don't really taste the lemon piece. It's more of a just an acidic feel. The maple
Hmm.
syrup is sweet and it's got that viscous quality because of the syrupness. Now, you definitely want to pick a good maple syrup, as you said. Apple cider, if you can get the cold pressed, that would be awesome. But depending on your bourbon, I mean, this is kind of a dealer's choice. If you want something that's like
Hmm. Sure.
really like I don't know, caramely and or kind of mossy, you could do that. I don't know. I fell in love with it. I've had, I don't know, six, and over the course of the last week because we've been trying this a lot lately. I definitely think try it with the tahini if you have it. If you don't have it, definitely use the cayenne pepper or even
Hmm.
like just crushed chili powder. If you've got some of that, that'll work.
Okay.
But you need a little bit of heat. I think that really helps balance it out. It gives it a little bit of something, something. But that
Makes it pop,
tahini,
yeah.
whoo, it
Yeah.
it it's
Yeah,
real good. It's my favorite tahini drink I've ever had,
yeah, the
hands down.
the the tahine was a happy accident there for sure. And yeah, this one was delicious. It's really simple to put together, and those are ingredients that you might just have on hand all the time. This would have made for a perfect lobby bar cocktail, to be honest. So with that, Michaela, let's go ahead and mix up another, I don't know, like two or three Hoosier Heritages. Right, there's some high stress basketball games we need to make our way through. So let's do that. So let's go ahead and mix up another one of these, and we'll be right back to chat about this week's film, Hoosiers.
We're going to be a tough team to beat. Now you come along for the ride.
A tough coach. He turned losers into fighters, enemies into friends,
I play, coach stays. He goes, I go.
challenges into triumphs.
If you put your effort and concentration into playing to your potential, in my book, we're going to be winners.
Hoosiers. It'll go straight to your heart. Rated PG.
Starts tomorrow at selected theaters near you.
Spoiler warning for Hoosiers. If you've not seen this film, you've had tons of time to do it. So sorry, not sorry. We're going to talk about all the things. We're going to talk about the big game at the end. We're going to talk about Dennis Hopper. We're going to talk about all the things. And so you've been warned. If you don't want to know how this movie ends, go watch it. Uh, you can do it. And if you're going to do that, you definitely need to make yourself a official state cocktail because that is amazing. And then you can come back and we can chat about it. You've
Yeah, the
been
good.
warned.
Yeah, the good old Hoosier heritage there. Yeah, mix one of those up for sure. This was released in 1986, so it is almost 40 years old now, and it's a sports movie, Michaela, so no spoilers needed. This could only end one way for sure. This was directed by David Anspaugh, and it stars Gene Hackman as the newcomer to town slash disgraced former basketball coach looking for another chance, Norman Dale. Barbara Hershey is the teacher slash mentor slash fill-in principal, Myra Fleener, and Dennis Hopper plays the drunken assistant coach, father, doing his best out there for everyone. Shooter. This was nominated for 2 Academy Awards, Michaela. One for Shooter, right there, supporting actor for Dennis Hopper, and original score nominations for Jerry Goldsmith. So, yeah, Hoosiers, widely held as one of the greatest sports films of them all. And we mentioned at the top, right? If you ask anyone about Gene Hackman's films, there's several notable ones, of course, because by the time Hoosiers comes out, Gene Hackman had already been like nominated for 3 Academy Awards, starting way back in 1968. So Gene Hackman was no slouch to the profession by the time that this came out, right? And this was 40 years back, so quite the storied career there. So I thought maybe we could talk about the story here just a little bit. It is a sports film, so kind of all of the tropes are there, right? You have Coach Norman Dale, who's coming to town to basically repay a favor or help out a friend, right? The principal here of this small town Indiana school, and we learn a little bit about kind of the background of Norman Dale. He was a college coach. He says in a town meeting that he had left to serve in the military. We never really get official word on if that was true or not, but we find out later in the film that he had been fired from his post and basically banned from college basketball, right? So he is brought into town, definitely an outsider type of a figure for the small community of, I don't know, like 50 people live in this town, something like that. I'm from a pretty small town, but it's not even that small of a town. And I wanted to make mention of that because you brought that up in the beginning, Michaela. I'm from a very small farm town in Ohio. So like the first 5 minutes of this movie, when Norman Dale is just driving through the countryside, I'm like, that looks like home.
Yeah, yeah. I think it looks like home to a lot of people. And I think that that's one of the things that like endears you or the watcher, the audience member to this film. Even at the beginning, it's almost too perfect. Like it looks like small town Americana, right?
Hmm.
It's supposed to be like in 1951, which sounds like this golden time. Probably really wasn't that golden at all, but like I love it. It's fall, the leaves are rustling, like it's just a beautiful like opening kind of montage to this kind of farm town where he's going through little like vignettes of a couple of different like farm fields, and I had no idea what they were. I guess it's sugarcane because we learn about sugarcane later in the movie. But yeah, and then the high school, it looks like my dad's high school from his little town of Billings,
Mm.
Montana.
Hmm.
It looks just like it. It's crazy. I actually was like, where was this filmed? Because it looks the exact same architecture of it. But it's definitely everything that like now you think of in your rose-colored hindsight glasses of what it would be like in a small town in the 50s.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Norman Dale gets to this school to become the boys' basketball coach. He's introduced to the team. We're introduced to another kid there that had previously played on the team. His name is Jimmy Chitwood, and he was the best player in all of Hickory. He was the best player, right? The hopes and dreams were pinned on this kid for the team being any good, because in these small rural towns, a lot of kind of that town's identity is tied to how good the high school, football or basketball teams are. And Jimmy Chitwood had a lot of pressure on them. So when the previous coach, who was really a mentor figure to Jimmy Chitwood, passes away, creating the opening for Norman Dale to come in, Jimmy Chitwood is really kind of at this crossroads. You have Myra Fleener there, who is played by Barbara Hershey, who has, kind of taken on that instead of mentor role, right? Really, cares about Jimmy, cares about his future, and thinks that he could do things potentially greater than being basketball. And I really kind of like this sentiment because it harkens back to, like I said, these small town kind of ideals here. She's like, he is destined for great things. And of course, Coach Norman Dale's like, well, being a basketball player is great. And she's like, yeah, but in a small town like this, if you're good at basketball, that's all you ever are, right? You can never be anything other than that if you're really good at, this, high school sports thing. And she wanted to see him get out of there, which was kind of at odds, with the rest of the town. And even, Myra Fleener's kind of, ideals of, sticking around and, doing what's right by the town and things like that. So they're kind of at a crossroads here over this kid. And we learn a little bit more about the rest of the team is they're a little bit thin. Right, you need five players on the basketball court at any given time, and the team is comprised of about five and a half individuals here after this first practice.
Oh, let's not call him half an individual just because he's short. And by short, I mean he's still like 5'8", like he's still
Oh
way
yeah,
taller than me. I mean, let's
towers
be
over
honest,
me,
but
sure, yeah.
but but I mean, like I love the juxtaposition between Myra Fleener and Norm, right?
Hmm.
Because the first time they meet, Myra is incredibly like inquisitive, almost like interrogatory. Is that the right word? She just
Sure.
asks a bunch of questions like, where have you been? Who are you? And at first you think she's going to be one of these people that's like, you better bring the goods, right? You better make the state team amazing. You better make it awesome, right? But instead she's like, look, I want you to leave Jimmy alone. He doesn't want to play, and I don't want you to pressure him to play. And and Norm is amazing. I love the banter between the two of them at first because there's a spark there, but you think it is pure hatred at the beginning because he's like, man, if everyone is as friendly as you, I'm screwed. Like this place is horrible. Like this is the most unfriendly welcome. I mean, I think what you mean is thank you for coming to do this is what, So but I love that their relationship, Myra's and Norm's, kind of grows from that, where she does say, hey, there's a lot more out there. She herself left town. She tried to go and do something more, be something bigger, and go to a bigger city. And it didn't work out. Now she's back and she has no clue what she's doing on this farm, which I think is interesting because like there's a scene where they're talking about Jimmy. And she is hoeing the land. She says, I've looked at the farmer's almanac and it's told me it's time to plant. She has no idea what she's doing in this giant pile of
Yeah.
mud. And she's got this hoe. And look, I'm a city girl comparatively, right? And I
Hmm.
was like, girlfriend, what are you doing? What's happening?
I don't know if it speaks to Myra Fleener's character or if it speaks more to Barbara Hershey's
Right.
ability at doing any farm work. But I have to say, that is not very good at hoeing the land, the job that she was doing
That's
right there,
right.
for sure, for sure. But yeah, Barbara Hershey is great in this role, kind of as this mentor figure. And she even steps up to become, I guess, the appointed kind of principal, I guess, of the
Yeah.
school here once the principal falls ill and is, kind of bedridden here about halfway through the movie. So that's good. And then, of course, it goes through your traditional kind of, sports film tropes. A lot of those get created here within the film of Hoosiers, right? So you have this outsider coach who the town kind of turns on because, of course, he likes to ruffle some feathers, shake things up a little bit. And, this small town is likes to do things the way they've always been done, right? We always play this kind of defense. We always do this, this and that, right? So the town is at end or is at odds with Coach Norman Dale. But of course, through some success on the basketball court and some kudos, some accolades from the rest of the town. Of course, Myra Fleener stands up for him, and even Jimmy Chitwood, who is going to come to the aid of Coach Norman Dale here at a town meeting when they're voting to basically oust him from his job. He says, "No, you know what? I will come back and play basketball, but it is only if I can do so for Coach Norman Dale." And then, of course, at that point, the team is off to the races. They're going to go on a winning streak, and that's going to carry them all the way through the end of the movie. But they couldn't do it without the help of an assistant coach, right? Who's going to come in and do some coaching, right? To be put into a position. And I really like kind of the way that they handle the character of Shooter Flatch. He is the father of one of the boys on the basketball team. He seems like he knows everything about basketball, but a bit of a drunk. Played by Dennis Hopper, gets nominated for an Academy Award here in this film. And Coach Norman Dale does good by him. He's like, you clean yourself up, wear a suit. Come in. I want you to be my assistant coach. He really kind of puts him to the fire to see if Shooter's going to be able to handle the pressure. And, for, the most part, he's able to do that. But, it does kind of fall off the wagon. But you do see kind of his stages in recovery. So let's talk about him, Michaela. Dennis Hopper here as Shooter Fletch. What do we think about Dennis Hopper?
Well, first of all, I think that he's a vampire because this was done in 1986 and he looked almost exactly the same like 10 years later when he was a bad guy in speed, right? He's almost
Mm-hmm.
exactly the same. He looks amazing. I really love this character. He's endearing, even though he's a total drunk at the beginning. Um, and what I love about it is Norm sees something in him. Norm sees his passion for the game, that while the former assistant coach, or the one who was just helping out, kind of had a passion for winning, this
Mm,
guy has a passion for the actual game. He knows, he watches the competition, he watches kind of the movements. He's talking about like the techniques and all of the things, and truly like a man who loves the game. Now he used to play, because that's what a lot of people did. Say they used to. I used to be great, but Norm has no problem in talking to him like an adult and being gentle, but also being firm. And I love the first conversation that they have, where Norm goes to his house, and or to where he's staying. I don't think it's his house, because his son's not there, his wife's not there. They've probably kicked him out, and he's living in this ramshackle place where like the ceiling has holes in it, and it's really
hmm
like there's a little fire, and he's like, it's freezing, but I make a fire at night so I don't die, you know. And Norm just says, you're embarrassing your son. Like, you love him, but you need to quit drinking. And at first, Shooter is almost angry, but then he says, I don't want to hear that. And he says, I know you don't want to hear it, but you need to do something different. But he
hmm
believes in him, which is great, because I think that it's a great story in like the 80s around sobriety. I mean, this was probably the first time I had seen any sort of juxtaposition around athleticism and like addiction before. And I really like that, where it's like, you can be great, you can also have some very dark demons, and but you still can be believed in, which is exactly what Norm does. And you're right. He says, you got to quit drinking. You can't be around the kids drunk. You can't be around your son drunk. You need to look the part. But then he does these things on purpose. Norm gets himself kicked out of the game on purpose so that Shooter can rise to the occasion, and he does, and it's so great to watch. No one's perfect. Shooter has a moment, where he comes into the stadium drunk, and then they go and get him the help that he needs. But he knows that he's screwed up. He knows at that point that life is actually worth living. That gives him hope again, instead of at the beginning where everybody just thinks he's kind of this lost cause. And I really love that. It's a trope that's now been done to death, but I think that the reason why Hoosiers is so great is because it's the first time some of these tropes were ever done, and they were done
hmm
so like understatedly well, because it's not in your face. I mean, Gene Hackman is amazing at being like just quietly brilliant in this role. And
hmm
it really, that stands the test of time for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of like the journey that Coach Norman the journey that Coach Normandale kind of goes through on this, right? He comes to the school and he even, is talking about that. And, when he's talking there with Myra later, when she kind of uncovers the truth about him being kicked out of, this college, the coaching job, and, being banned from college coaching. And he's like, hey, no one in the world wanted to win more than me, right? So you have to see him, kind of at odds with that throughout this thing. You have to see him, at odds with how he's dealing with the referees, even, holding back just to purposefully, get himself kicked out of this game, later on in this film. You catch a very good moment of it when one of the kids, gets pushed into like a trophy case and slices his arm open, right? And then in the next game, his stitches bust out, and of course, Coach Norman Dale's like, "Nah, get back out there," and you see him, kind of at odds with that, right? To protect this kid over, the cost of winning or losing this game. So you see Gene Hackman kind of go through these things, and you get to see kind of that relationship then with Myra Fleener kind of develop. By that's not like the strongest part of the film, for sure. You could say as they go on a walk through the woods and I guess kind of consummate the way they feel about each other with maybe the most awkward kiss in all of film history, to be quite honest there. But that's nice. I really like kind of you get the interplay here with Norman Dale and Myra Fleener, and kind of that relationship gets brought to the forefront by Myra's mother, who was a big basketball fan. And maybe my favorite part about all of Hoosiers is that Myra Fleener, from like the opening like second of the movie, is like, listen, guy, I don't care about basketball at all. And even at the end when they win like the championship, she's like still like not even like applauding. She's like, I do not care about basketball at all, but I will be here to support you and to support these kids and to support the school. But basketball, not for Myra.
Not for Myra. I mean, look, I think both of them are brilliant in their own right. I do think that the chemistry is a little lacking when we get to the part where they're supposed to kind of fall for each other.
Mm-hmm.
It feels a lot more realistic that they've got this like banter. I think I would have liked it better if they'd had the conversation that kind of deepens their feelings and then went back to some kind of quip, like sharp quips with each other that then ended in a kiss instead of
Hmm.
trying to make it this emotionally like bloodletted moment.
It's meant to be
Because
like this, yeah, this romantic thing, yeah.
yeah, because I don't know, she very much is like this is, I mean, she saves him because she's the one who does all this, who does this research, because I guess she's the only one with brains in this entire, or the ability to like research thing in this entire little town, right? They're all worried about if he's going to win, and she's worried about like what kind of man he is.
Hmm.
But I get it. I get it to a point, but yeah, that one scene just kind of didn't quite work it for me. But I do like that. She's there to support him at the end. And there's a moment where he looks up and he sees her and she's there and he kind of smiles, but then he has to go back and be the coach. Like that's what he's got to do. Um, but I don't know, maybe that separateness is good. Because they both can be who they are and care about each other. I don't know. I don't, it's not a love story. This is definitely not a romance. This is a story about something else. It's kind of nice that it's there. But it's definitely not the focus.
Yeah, for sure. It's that's definitely not the focus, and like any great sports film, really the sports aspect of it is really not the focus either. And I think that that is the case here for Hoosiers as well. Certainly, it's kind of playing through these basketball games, but really it's about learning more about these characters, and being a film from 1986, the character building is maybe not at the same sort of you know we don't view it under the same like microscopic lens as we might as stories today for sure. But one of the things that is endearing about this movie then is kind of just this cast of characters, and they all have their own kind of like quirky like personality, right, to each of
Hmm.
them. Especially like all of the kids here playing basketball are really great. The townspeople, you like start to like identify and see different tropes of all these different townspeople. You have like the sheriff who keeps like busting into like the locker room to be like, "What are you doing out there, coach, you idiot?" And then you have like one of the kids' dad is always standing up telling everyone that they're acting like a bunch of idiots to calm down and get out of there, let coach do his job. So it's really kind of like a cult of personalities, I guess, here in this
Mm.
town, more that you're kind of exploring throughout this fame. But there is important basketball stuff that happens within the film, of course, right? We get to go through several games, right? Some losses there at the beginning, and then, which turn into wins, and then this kind of miracle run through the playoffs all the way to the state championship game. And there's some stuff about this that I absolutely love, as being from a small town myself, right? Even get like some like whispers of it early on in the story when Coach Normandale is talking to Myra about Jimmy, and she's like, listen, she's like, this is a small town, like no one from like these big schools or anything are going to come watch him here, right? Like this isn't a place that they go. So you get that, and then all the way up to the state championship game when the kids are all awestruck there, and you get Normandale who's talking to the reporter, and he's like, listen, he's like, none of these kids have ever seen a building that is higher than 2 stories tall, right? They've never
Yep.
been in a room with more than like 100 people, like the environment of this thing is like well beyond like anything they can expect. So whatever happens. And then kind of my favorite like scene, I guess, of the film, especially in like a sporting kind of aspect to it, is they go into this big beautiful arena, and it's filmed in the same gymnasium that the actual 1954 state championship game was filmed in. And he pulls out the tape measure and has them measure how far it is to the free throw line, and how far it is, how tall it is to the basketball hoop, and tells them that this court is exactly the same as the one that they play on, even though 20,000 people are going to be there cheering them on, and the team that they're playing is definitely at a different quality level probably than the teams that they're used to playing, for sure. So that's kind of my favorite like sporting moments, like even beyond like them winning the game. I love that little
Yeah.
kind of personal interaction there. But talking about the sports of it, or just anyone else, I guess, in the town, Michaela, was there anything that kind of stood out to you throughout the film Hoosiers, rewatching it all these
Um,
years later?
I really liked, well, I didn't like, but I found it interesting where, yeah, they just kind of bombard him. The small towns, and now that I live in the South, right? And I'm fairly new to the South. I've been here maybe 6 years, but people say like small towns are real friendly. The South is real friendly, and it's real not. So they have this meet and greet at the beginning, and they just bombard him with a lot of things about like this is how we do it here, and he's
It's
not
it's like a
impolite.
facade of friendliness.
Right, right. It's like we're friendly as long as you do exactly what we say when we say it, and you're going to be our pawn and take us to, the playoffs. That's all they cared about was like the regional playoffs,
Hmm.
because they had no hopes of going to the state championship, certainly. And so that is interesting that continues to permeate through the season until this one kid, Jimmy, right, turns around and says, "Well, I'm only going to come back and play basketball if this guy does." And then they kind of all rally against him or rally for Norm to be the coach. Um, I really liked how at the very end, again, Gene Hackman's character Norm is very understated. He's a man of small words, few words. He says the things he means with the things that he says. And he doesn't do what I see now, or I saw in my high school, which is a bunch of, alliteration, a lot of pontification about what we should be doing and techniques and, blah, trying to capture the essence of Norm.
Hmm.
Right. Like
Right.
I feel like people want to be this kind of coach, but he's so the most affectionate thing he does is at the very end of the prayer. He just tells them that he loves them. And he's like, I love you guys. Let's go play. And it's really lovely because it's so understated. You know that he really feels it. He really means it. And he's finally got that balance right because he wants to win, sure, but he also really cares about each one of these kids. He cares about the people that are playing for him. He cares about the town, even though they've been a total pain in the patootie. And each one kind of says what they're going to win for. Like, let's win it for all the other farm towns that are never going to make it this far. It's just really endearing, and I love that. Yeah, I really love that. I think this was the reason why this is so beloved is it's not really about basketball. Most great sports films aren't even about the sport really that they're playing, but
Hmm.
it's more about the type of people coming together to make the dream happen and the lessons that you learn along the way. And I love that Shooter is listening to the match, to the game, like,
Hmm.
and jumping out of his because he's in rehab and the nurse isn't even looking up at him. He's like, she must be so tired of him talking about basketball, but he's like freaking out. He's so happy. And he's so proud of his son, and his son had visited him before and said he was really proud of him. And so, life goes on after the game. And I think that this really shows that. And I like that.
Yeah, for sure. Especially, when it comes to like high school sports, right? The very few are the ones that, get to carry on that sporting journey, right? So this is the end of the story for a lot of these kids out there. And it touches to that as well, for sure, right? So, after this basketball game, they're state champions. And of course, kind of the last shot is that, going up to that photograph. But, at the end of all this, maybe Jimmy goes on and does something else, but the rest of those kids, right, they're going to go back and work on the family farm or work in the store there in town or whatever the case is for those kids. So that's pretty great. And yeah, Hoosiers does a lot to kind of separate sports films out and turn them into kind of these you know more like deeper like personal tales. It's not so much about the sport as it is about, like I said, the characters here of the film. And David Anspaugh apparently is pretty good at this, right? Because he does Hoosiers in 1986, which is widely regarded as one of the best sports films of all time. And then he goes on to direct another film that we've covered here on the podcast, Michaela, Rudy, in 1993, which is also considered to be one of the great sports films of all time. And yeah, neither of those movies really are about basketball or about football, right? Well, they're kind of about Indiana because that's where David Anspaugh is from, right? But they're really about, the characters here, and the sports of it all is just the backdrop of this film, right? It's kind of secondary to exploring, how Gene Hackman embodies this coach of Norman Dale, or about how Barbara Hershey, embodies
Hmm.
this Myra Fleener character who aspires for the kids to do better. Kind of reminds me of the October Sky film we talked about,
Hmm.
not super long ago. It seems like a long time ago now, though. But yeah, in the hierarchy of sports films, this one is definitely up there. You mentioned, Michaela, that you did not watch this. Very close to 1986, I don't imagine. I think you might have mentioned it at the top that you watched it, closer to high school, right? So it would have been about a decade on, and I think it had kind of set in on people by that point that this was, one of the all-time great sports films, and then, just kind of generally just one of the all-time great films, especially in terms of Gene Hackman's memorable roles there. Do you remember like watching it for the first time and how you felt about it differently watching it, presumably here sometime in the last couple of days before we talked about it?
Yeah, I think the first time I focused a lot more on the darkness around the circumstances of Norman's uh kind of fall from grace, right? Or fall from I don't know. When he hit the kid and he talks about, I remember
Right.
watching that scene and being really moved, um and then wanting to know more about it. And then when I was young, so, and I was not a basketball fan, so I think I was more interested in that piece of it than actually what inspired me most rewatching it, which was the story of the coach, the assistant coach shooter, right? And the
Hmm.
the idea that, and it's interesting because both men have fallen from grace, and that's probably why Norm's character looks at this guy and gives him a chance, because he himself was given a chance to come back to a game that he loved, right?
Hmm.
And the stakes are a little bit different, but also grave, right? If Norm failed, the whole town would, kind of crumple up and die, it felt like. But if Shooter failed, he would lose his relationship with his son, likely his wife, and maybe even his life because of the health aspects of his drinking. So I,
Hmm.
yeah, when I saw it the first time, it was like this lovely story about like like not bad news bears per se, but like a team that just kind of claws their way to the top. And as an adult, I watch it and I see a much more of the layers of the human aspect of the stories behind it, and the growth that happens and the paradigm shift that happens for all of these characters over time, which to me, is the marker of what makes a great film for me. So,
Hmm.
yeah, definitely a difference. It still stands up to the test of time. This is definitely something that a child can watch. Like my son is 10 and he really enjoyed it. He thought it was great. Um, there are because of the alcoholism and things, there's a little bit of an adult thematic element to it, but certainly nothing it's pretty tame. And I think it stands the test of time from kind of a just a film making. There's not a lot of, yeah, there's some really great shots. Like my favorite is the montage of them going into the town, but like even the quality of the filming is very good compared to some of the other movies that were made at the time.
Hmm.
So definitely worth someone's time. And I think probably a good study of, you know, watching before and watching after.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of take different things away from it because, I would have watched this probably not in 1986, but I probably would have watched it like in the early 90s, I suppose, is required watching for anyone who is, from a town like this, maybe is potentially the case. And that, kind of kicked off a string probably about then because you had a bunch of like sports movies that came out, about that time that we would have been, kind of 10, 11, 12 years old. So it kind of, is coming all on the footsteps here of Hoosiers. And I think, watching it for the first time, like as a youngster, you kind of identify obviously more, in any sort of tale like this, you're going to identify more with like the players on the team and like who do they like represent of like the other like kids that that are in your class and playing these sports alongside of you and stuff like that. And then your perspective kind of shifts over the years and you start to see things more from Coach Norman Dale's perspective or Myra Fleener's perspective or the town's folks' perspective and things like that. So really really great kind of story, and like I said, laid the foundation for what sports films could not necessarily try to emulate, but try to achieve, or kind of the way that they're structured. And it did a lot of these things first here, and that's partially why Hoosiers is so deeply regarded, and everyone
Hmm.
loves a good little underdog story. Wanted to shout out the Indiana Pacers, who I think in 2015 did like throwback jerseys here to the Hickory uniforms to pay homage to their
Oh, that's
in-state
cool.
basketball kids here from this film. That is pretty cool. That's pretty cool, and yeah, this certainly is one of the all-time greats. And Gene Hackman, also one of the all-time greats. So I don't know, Michaela, do you have anything else to talk about Hoosiers here, or is it time to go watch some more March Madness and see how our
Um,
brackets fare? Probably bad. I
yeah.
didn't do a bracket, to be honest. So
Yeah, I don't even know how I always was worried. I'm so bad at sports, Brian, that I was like, is March Madness basketball or is it baseball? Yeah,
is it in
real
March?
bad. I don't know. I will say this. I myself am gonna go and have another drink because this Indiana cocktail is freaking amazing.
The Hoosier Heritage.
The Hoosier Heritage. Thank you. I'm like the formal name. I has slipped my mind. I need another one, but it's so good. It's so
Very
good.
good.
So if honestly, if you all are listening and you're like, I don't know, I've never done a cocktail from Drink the Movies, do this one because it's worth it. It really is. It's very tasty.
Yeah, it's very tasty. And if you've ever had one in the great state of Indiana, please let us know that and send us pictures of yours. If you want to see pictures of our Hoosier heritage, episode recaps, links to the merchandise store, links to Patreon, patreon.com/drink the movies, or links to drink the video games, that can all be found on our website. It is www.drinkthemovies.com. Go there, get all of that information, and then make sure you're following along with us on our social media. It's a great way to interact with the podcast. We can be found at Drink the Movies on Instagram and Threads and Blue Sky and Facebook.com/drink the movies. So go check that out and let us know how you're doing in your own basketball bracket, or let us know what you think about Hoosiers, or is it the best sports film of all time? Let us know that over there. And then while you have your phone out or your computer out, you want to make sure that you get subscribed to the podcast. That way you get caught up on everything we've got going on here. So Michaela, where can they do that?
You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, anywhere where Spotify podcasts are supported and distributed. Whatever you're listening to us on now, I promise there's a subscribe button. We're even on YouTube. I had actually had somebody ask me if we were on YouTube and I had to show them where we were, but we're everywhere.
Hmm.
Press the subscribe button. And if you're really liking what you're hearing, feel free to share us, leave us 5-star reviews where you can on whatever you're listening to us on. It really helps us get all the Drink the Movies goodness out there. And don't forget, we also have Drink the Video Games, which is amazing. It will. I've heard that this episode is one of your fan favorites, absolute favorites so far, Brian. So
Mm.
this is exciting, exciting stuff. And there's a cocktail in there for sure.
That's right. Yeah, really happy with the way this one came together. Look for that to drop next week, wherever you're listening to this, over at Drink the Video Games. So, yeah, with that, thank you so much for joining us here as we remember fondly back on Gene Hackman, rest in peace, and this great film that has been quite too long since I've watched it, but excited to go back and revisit it. So, with that, Michaela, let's go ahead and mix up another Hoosier Heritage, and we'll talk to everyone next time on
Drink
Drink
the
the
Movies.
Movies.
4 passes. Four. How many? Four.
Four, four passes.